I want to take a minute to talk about the matchmaking real quick because of the fact that I think overall, everybody at all ranks kind of has an issue with the matchmaking. It doesn't feel like we're getting games that are evenly matched up on both sides. Now, we know from the past EOMM video that the matchmaking was laid out like this. If you have a Diamond 3 average rank and you have average rank Platinum 1, then it tries to figure out average rank to get both sides to be about the same. So if the average rank is Diamond 2 on one side, it wants to make sure that the average rank is Diamond 2 on the other side, which seems pretty straightforward. But they also laid out some of those issues that you might have in the game, like perhaps your best player isn't on DPS, or perhaps people are off rolling, or perhaps groups aren't being as cooperative and working together, which can also make games much more difficult, which are absolutely valid reasons as to why the matchmaking on both sides might even be fair, but not feel fair in that moment. And the matchmaking working like this is essentially the same as it is in other games. Is trying to average out the ranks and get it as close as possible. And if you are one on the lower side of those ranks, you'll get a few more points versus if you're on the higher side, you won't get as many. So all of this checks out in terms of functioning as if it's just like every other game. However, the one problem I have is the fact that the ranks are inconsistent in terms of what they mean. So the way that Rivals works is we have constant rank resets and performance-based SR, which makes this game function differently than other games. So for instance, on this team here, there's one Diamond 2 here and another Diamond 2 here. Even though they're both ranked Diamond 2, what matters is how recently they got to Diamond 2. If this person was Diamond 2 at the start of the season and then took a break and didn't play, but it's getting towards the end of the season, so he wants to play some more, and this person has been playing the whole time and he's only just now getting to Diamond 2, these two players are not equal in terms of their skill level. So let's use a matchmaking example here where we have basically an average of GM2 across the board for both of these teams right here. Technically speaking, if we're just talking about the ranks, both of these teams could be evenly matched. However, what is not taken into consideration is when that person achieved that rank. So let's say that this is at the end of the season and the matchmaking is there. What were their ranks 3 weeks ago? So let's say hypothetically 3 weeks ago, we see where they were in terms of their skill level and average ranking. Because here we can see someone who was Plat 1 that was playing the entire time and reached GM2, but here we see someone who was GM1 to start at that point, but then didn't play and was still GM1. Same for this person over here. So even though technically, yes, they are a GM1 player, the types of people that former GM1 player was used to going up against were far more difficult to beat in comparison to the GM players now. So even though hypothetically there's a GM1 on this team and another GM1 on this team, they're not technically of the same skill level because what your rank means varies in terms of when you got that rank. So even if you have a matchmaking system which is trying to balance out people of equal ranks, it doesn't really matter too much if those ranks don't have a consistent meaning behind them. For instance, if we use another example and we see where was everybody last season, in a hypothetical situation like this, which is something that does happen, you're going up against enemies that had a peak rating of like Celestial or Eternity, and another team might have had a peak rating of Diamond or Plat or even Celestial or GM. So a big reason why I feel like the matchmaking is so poor is because of the fact that it's working exactly like every other game, but every other game doesn't use performance-based SR, and it doesn't have constant rank resets, and it doesn't start you from the very bottom every single time. And the reason that we have the performance-based SR is because of the rank resets and because it shoves everyone to the bottom. So former Eternity players are going to be in Diamond, Celestial will be Diamond and Plat, GM will be in Plat and maybe Gold, and what makes it worst of all is Bronze, Silver, and Gold are all shoved into the very bottom of Bronze, which I can only imagine how the matchmaking works down there. But I know it can't be good. And because the seasons are so short, you need some sort of system to push people into the higher ranks faster. So what do? Well, you add performance-based SR. This gives players the ability that if they have good stats, high stats, they can rise through the ranks a little bit faster. And therefore, we could fill up the higher ranks again before the next rank reset. And while I understand that high elo players will still benefit from performance-based SR due to their efficiency at getting damage and doing kills, those players understand when to do damage and when to get those kills a lot better than the lower elo players will. And the lower elo players who focus on chasing kills, even if it means at the detriment of their own death, will still gain more for their wins and less for their losses because of it, meanwhile actually being a hindrance to their team rather than a help. So while the positives of performance-based SR help the highest elo players, it also has a negative side effect that ultimately affects low elo players as well. But the other problem is that now we have all these other players in Bronze, Silver, and Gold that are all playing against each other, and Bronze, Silver, and Gold are, by the end of the season is massively different in terms of the quality of players, as well as the skill level. And because of the fact that we start people at the very bottom, everybody's alt accounts and Smurfs comes over into this rank and already messes up the already terrible matchmaking that's down there. So what do you do to try and fix some of the terrible matchmaking down in the lower elos especially? Well, you add chrono shields. To me, their matchmaking makes entirely perfect sense. And I actually think it's working as intended. It actually sets you up as GM players against other GM players and Diamond players against other Diamond players. I have no reason to doubt that they do that. But the only way that method makes sense is if there's some sort of consistency between what it means to be a plat player versus what it means to be a GM player. Because are you a plat player at the end of the season, or are you a plat player at the start of the season? Those are two wildly different skill gaps. And the only way this system works is if it assumes that everybody is playing the same amount all the time. But there are lots of different reasons as to why people aren't playing the same amounts. Maybe they don't have as much time. Maybe they take a break. And because of that lack of consistency, every time you take a break and then you come back to play the games are actually going to be easier than if you just kept playing the entire time. Because at the start of the season, if you're in Diamond, you're going up against former Celestial and Eternity players versus playing at the end of the season when you're actually playing against legit Diamond players then. And the problem is too, if we extend the seasons out so that it gives people more time because of the performance-based SR and because of the fact that it gives so much more points due to your stats in the lower ranks, you start to get those moments where GM is then the top 13% versus the top 5%. And really, this is another reason as to why I'm against performance-based SR. I prefer to just be based off of wins, is because of the fact that we need consistency amongst the ranks. We also probably need fewer rank resets. So that way we know that if you are playing in GM, it means the same thing as it does last season as it does this season. There are lots of different reasons why people might not be playing every single day or might not want to play every single season. And I understand that if somebody hasn't played maybe in 6 months, then maybe you take them down a couple of ranks. But the problem is sometimes people legitimately take breaks for more than a season, and suddenly what used to be a former GM player is now thrown back into bronze, and now they're essentially forced to smurf when they didn't want to in the first place. And I understand that they tried to have a different system. They were trying to do something new. So I don't fault them for trying something new, but the problem is that it's very difficult to make a matchmaking system that works around the idea that ranks are constantly shifting their meanings. Understand that this is the way that the system works. It's always motivated me to just try my absolute hardest in every single game, because there's an absolutely real possibility that even though I'm playing in GM, that the former enemies I'm going up against were one above all. While I'm not opposed to the occasional rank reset every now and then, I would like for the ranks to have a bit more of a consistent meaning, rather they only have certain meanings in terms of when you ask. And with placement matches, you wouldn't need things like performance-based SR or any sort of boost to help you get to the higher ranks, especially if placement matches already stick you someplace higher to begin with. I just get the feeling that the competitive system is a bit more overcomplicated than it needs to be, and a lot of the things that we're putting in here as solutions are only band-aid fixes to problems that shouldn't be there in the first place. And while I definitely enjoy a good challenge of going up against better opponents, it's definitely not a fun feeling when you know that your entire team is outclassed and there's nothing you can do. I'm sure that they're working on fixes behind the scenes that we're not totally aware of, especially as it seems that they're working towards placement matches in the first place. And I don't exactly know how the new system is going to work, but I just wanted to put this out there to maybe help explain what I think the matchmaking is doing, so that way there's less frustration you have in your own games. There's not much really any of us can do about it at this moment. I can't change anything about this. All I can say is that because the ranks have different meanings at different times, you should always be trying your hardest in every one of your games, because you never know when you're going to be going up against tougher opponents. But also in those games where your team just gets totally stomped, I don't want you to dwell on that too long either, because maybe that game really wasn't winnable. This video is not meant to be some sort of way to teach you how to game the system. It's just an explanation of what I think is happening. Because at the end of the day, the only way to rank up is to get better anyways, so you might as well just play. But anyway, that's all I got for this one. That's how I think the matchmaking system is working. If I missed anything, feel free to let me know down in the comments.